Hi, do you know today's thought? And today's thought is actually going to be a lecture, I guess, or instruction, or we'll just call it a basic course in the Geneva Convention, Geneva Convention 101. This could be just this one thought. It could be a whole series. I may do additional ones. But the reason I'm doing this one today is because of some, I'm just tired of hearing something. Well, it was the latest statement was from Barack Obama. Now, I have to say that apparently the Democratic Party or the Biden administration is getting a lot of pressure from the far left of the Democratic Party, which these days is basically the Democratic Party. Because in the beginning, when Israel was in the aftermath of these horrible atrocities that Hamas perpetrated on innocent Israeli women, children, babies, cutting off the heads of babies and old people, it's just, and taking over 200 hostages. In the beginning, the support from this administration was unequivocal that Israel has to get in there, go into Hamas and just eliminate Hamas, just destroy them. But they've been walking that back a little bit, I think, because now you're getting these statements that Israel has the right to defend themselves, but they have to be careful not to hurt civilians. And keeping in mind that, well, they're not keeping it in mind, but when we were in Iraq and we just liberated Mosul, when we went into Mosul, house-to-house fighting, urban fighting, we killed 9,000 civilians. 9,000 civilians died. I said we killed, but I'm assuming some of those could have been killed by Al-Qaeda or whoever was in there at the time. And so for us now to come to chastise Israel, if a few civilians, if 1,000 civilians get killed in Gaza, it's a little bit rich for me. But what I want to talk about today is apparently, because they never say this to Hamas, Hamas is using their civilians as human shields. They are deliberately putting them out to get killed. So Israel, the point I'm getting at is that apparently Israel is Hamas, they don't even say anything to Hamas. They don't blame Hamas for anything, but Israel is supposed to be responsible for protecting the civilians on both sides, and that is not true. And there was a BBC interviewer interviewing I believe it was Bennett, an Israeli official, and quoting, reading a article 43 of the Geneva Convention, but apparently she never read the whole thing. She didn't read. Well, let's talk about that right now. I guess two for a couple of points. But Article 23, this whole idea of humanitarian aid and pressuring Israel to let humanitarian aid in. Article 23, and this is the thing, I've read the word for word, the whole thing, the Geneva Convention, and these people who are quoting the Geneva Convention don't know what they're talking about, and I don't think they even read it, and that's why I'm here to give you the correct information. You can go on the internet and you can pull up a copy, as I did, and read the whole thing. But Article 23 says that it obligates, Israel would be obligated to provide, to allow humanitarian aid to go through, food and medicine, under these conditions. That's provided that none of the aid, sum it up basically, that none of the aid can go to Hamas, that it can go to the combatants. It has to go only to the civilians, and if that cannot be guaranteed, then Israel does not have to provide the aid, does not have to let a third party transport the aid into Gaza, unless there's an absolute guarantee that Hamas will not, that either they won't benefit, they won't get the aid directly, but also if Gaza has food, let's say, and they could give it, that they could provide to the civilians, and they're not, Israel is not obligated to let aid come in to make up the difference. There's what the basic principle of of the Geneva Convention, which is what I want to get to. Well, one more thing I'll put in. The Geneva Convention applies to what they call high contracting parties. That's mentioned over and over. And what is a high contracting party? A high contracting party is a country, one of the countries that signed the Geneva Convention. So Hamas is not a country and did not sign the Geneva Convention. And so the Geneva Convention doesn't apply to Hamas. They're not covered by the Geneva Convention, and the Geneva Convention is basically a contract among all these parties. And there's something else to keep in mind, that there's no police force or no enforcement mechanism to enforce the organization, to enforce the articles of the Geneva Convention. So what is the enforcement? And the enforcement is the good faith of all the parties, or their adherence to the agreement. Like any contract, if I hire you to mow my lawn for $10 or something, you mow my lawn, I have to give you $10. If you don't mow my lawn, then the contract is null and void. I don't have to pay you the $10. You didn't fulfill your end. And that's the same idea. It's a contract among parties, the Geneva Convention, these high contracting parties. And the enforcement mechanism is the keeping of the agreement by both sides. So let's take something like torture, okay? Torture, you're not allowed, the Geneva Convention prohibits torturing prisoners of, if you have a prisoner, you can't torture the prisoner, and a prisoner of war. Your soldiers, if I capture your soldiers on the battlefield, if I'm one country and you're another country, I can't torture your soldiers, and you can't torture mine. And what is the enforcement mechanism? It's that if I torture your soldiers, then you will torture mine. So it's the golden rule: do not do unto others what you would not want done to you. So that's the enforcement mechanism. So if Hamas is torturing or mistreats Israeli soldiers, then Israel can do the same thing under the Geneva Convention. But keep in mind that Hamas is not a party to the Geneva Convention, and it's not covered by the Geneva Convention. But put that aside, because Israel, and this is what drives me crazy, these people are saying Israel, take care of your try not to harm the civilians, yada, yada, yada. Well, they're already doing that, even though they don't have to under the Geneva Convention. They're a civilized Western country, same as the United States, same as Belgium, same as France, same as Germany, same as Italy. And they're not going to do that, even though they're not obligated under the Geneva Convention. But the overriding principle, this is what I want to get to, of the Geneva Convention, is that at the end of the day, the combatants has the right to pursue the enemy wherever the enemy is. Israel has a right to go to, if Hamas is using their civilians as human shields, Israel has a right to go after. They can't target the civilians, but they can target the Hamas, the combatants, and if civilians are collateral damage, then so be it. Israel has the right. They don't have to sit there and let a terrorist standing behind widows and orphans, doesn't have to let them just stand there and get shot at. They have a right to shoot back. Also, and this is where where the obligation about protecting civilians, the obligation on each party is to protect its own civilians by, for example, wearing uniforms and carrying arms, guns, the rifles openly. So Hamas they're required to wear uniforms so that the Israelis know who is a combatant, a Hamas terrorist, and who is a civilian. If a terrorist dresses in civilian clothes, Israelis are not obligated to figure out whether that who's a civilian, who is not, if everybody looks the same. The obligation is on Hamas to wear uniforms and separate themselves. Also, they're obligated to, for instance, as any civilized country would do, or any civilized person, but the Hamas is, and so they don't. Hamas, Israel, they have military bases and they have arms, depots and ammo dumps separate from the civilian population. So, if you want, that's Hamas, there was no need to attack civilians. There was no military purpose to that. Israel has bases. They know where the bases are, and they can attack the bases. Hamas, on the other hand, hides their weapons in civilian homes, under hospitals. The headquarters of the military planners, of the military leadership of Hamas, is under a hospital, Shifa Hospital in Gaza. Israel destroyed an arms depot under a mosque, and so they had to destroy the mosque at the same time. There was no way to avoid it, but it's not Israel's problem, because Hamas is obligated to separate their military from the civilians, and getting back to this main point, if they choose to put their weapons and their soldiers in a mosque or in let's just say an orphanage or anywhere, any civilian home, Israel has the right under the Geneva Convention to attack, to go after those arms and those terrorists wherever they are. They are not they have to try, to the extent possible, they have to protect civilians, but at the end of the day, if it's a choice between going after a combatant and protecting a civilian, the Geneva Convention explicitly recognizes the right of Israel to go after the terrorists, again, wherever they are. That's the whole point of the Geneva Convention, recognizes the right of the combatants to go after the enemy wherever it is, but obligates to engage in war as humanely as possible. So, for instance, for self-defense, I'm a gun owner. I can walk into a gun store and buy hollow point bullets that will have the best stopping power. Military bullets are not. You look at them; they're steel jacketed, because you don't have to maim and tear somebody apart. You can, so that's what I mean. You use it recognizes the right to kill the enemy, but in as odd as it sounds, in humane a way as possible. So I'll give you the stark example. Let's say you have a crowd of widows and orphans, civilians, standing over here, and a crowd of terrorists standing over here with weapons. Israel, they cannot target shoot the civilians, because as Hamas would if they were Israelis and civilians, they cannot target the civilians because there's no military purpose. You understand it? They're all civilians. They can target Hamas, but if Hamas moves into the crowd of civilians so that they're all intermixed, then Israel has the right to target the terrorists, to shoot the terrorists, and if a civilian gets killed, that's the way it is. And that's assuming that the terrorists are wearing uniforms so that the Israelis can distinguish between the combatants and the civilians. If they can't, then if everybody's in civilian clothes and people are shooting at them, then Israel can do the best to find the people that have weapons and shoot them. And if the person holding a weapon is a civilian or a terrorist, it's not Israel's job to they're not obligated under the Geneva Convention to sit there and figure out who is who while they're getting shot at. That is completely false. So that's the lesson today. I just wanted to give that to you, and I may have future lessons in the future, though I think I covered pretty much. If you have any questions, put them in the comments, and I'll try to answer them. But that's my thought for today. Thanks for stopping by. If you could subscribe, that would really be great. Share this video with anyone you think would benefit from it, and come back and see me again. I would love to see all of you again, and until I do see you all again, bye.